And I would like to start with this next message. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, announced that Russia is considering the scenario of a terrorist attack on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Russian terrorists are pushing the world into the abyss of nuclear disaster. There have never been terrorist attacks on nuclear facilities, and this is categorically unacceptable. Radiation knows no boundaries. The hit targets are determined only by the direction of the wind. So this is a question of the safety of all humanity, as it was during the Chernobyl accidents. Ukraine has evidence of Russian plans, and all available information is passed on to state governments and international organizations. So from the very first day of the occupation, Russian troops have been provoking a catastrophe, mining the stations, passing military equipment and ammunition there, shelling the territory of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. So what are the dangers that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant carries exactly in the state in which it is now?
Well, first of all, the occupation of an operating nuclear power plant is the first time in the history of mankind. Currently, 5 power units of the ZNPP are in a state of cold shutdown. 1 power unit, number 5, not stop. The NPP has not produced electricity since September of the 22nd year. And the most dangerous state, the fact that power unit number 5 is not switched to cold shutdown, as the State Nuclear Regulatory Inspectorate of Ukraine wrote, because they want to bring the 5th power unit to the minimum controlled capacity, in order a larger scale of radiation emissions due to the accident.
That is the Russians, you mean?
Russians, yes. There are many scenarios. General Budanov said that the protective shield in the cooler tank was mined. Yes, mined spray ponds, which are also used for cooling. It is not necessary to blow up the reactor itself. It is enough to blow up pipelines that supply water for cooling, or ponds, or splash pools, so that it is not possible to cool power units. And why the most dangerous state of the 5th power unit? Because in the cold stop, the coolant temperature of the first circuit is 70 degrees. Less water is needed for cooling, and the temperature of the coolant of the first circuit in the 5th power unit is 275 degrees. Do you understand? And therefore, the difference. For example, let's imagine that there is no water for cooling. In the case of cold stop, from the moment there is no water to beginning of a serious accident with the melting of the active zone, 8 days. If there is no water for the 5th power unit, 27 hours. Accident like in Fukushima is beginning. I would like to point out that all the nuclear power plants of Ukraine have implemented instruments taking into account the lessons of Fukushima. In particular, there are hermetic envelopes. The reactor design is different from the one at the Chernobyl NPP. There are hydrogen recombinators and filters for the retention of radionuclides, right? There are enough mobile pumping stations, mobile reserve diesel generators. Undoubtedly, emissions of radioactivity as a result of a severe accident with melting of the active zone will be less than at Fukushima. Certainly. But we don't know yet. Maybe they will damage the hermetic shell, because the hermetic shell is such a roof, very strong, made of concrete, which covers the reactor. Therefore, it is necessary to prepare for the worst options, to be ready. And if they do not happen, well, it will be fine. Therefore, it is necessary to prepare.
You have now outlined the means and tools that have been taken into account in order to secure the situation in the event of a natural catastrophe. But we've heard a lot from nuclear security experts that this station was supposedly built back in the Soviet times, and it's supposed to be be so strong-built that it should be able to withstand any missile strikes. Is this also an illusory perception of our security?
I'm not an expert, I'm not a military expert, but I know that they simulated a strike with a tactical nuclear weapon on the reactor. I will not tell you about the results, but it is a sufficiently strong structure, a reactor. Therefore, I think that they will do the man-made accident in a different way. It is due to the explosion of a coolant reservoir, or water pipelines, or steam pipelines. That is, they will not mine the reactor in which the nuclear fuel is located.
Another threat I heard as a non-expert, I will ask you this question: which is the most dangerous, a reactor or spent fuel repository?
Reactor. The spent fuel storage, if they mine it and blow up the containers, everything will remain at the industrial site. And in the case of a severe accident with the melting of the active zone, then gaseous radionuclides from the active zone, and the most dangerous for people, iodine 131, when the reactor is at power.
Sure, well then, let's talk about how you say it is impossible to calculate the radius there and everything depends on conditions. But as for the countries of Europe, how much is in the affected area? We are talking only about Western European countries, or is the geography here so wide that the inhabitants, even of Germany and Netherlands, should be now aware?
For example, last year in the summer, they simulated accident with the weather conditions on a specific day. And then a radioactive cloud flew over the Krasnodar Krai and cesium-137 fell out. Well, in the model, with the concentration of which it was not allowed to use these agricultural lands for 300 years. Why? Because it was raining. The cloud flew over the Donbass, of course, then the Krasnodar Krai, then returned to Turkey. Well, the radiation is already weaker. And there were options when the Crimea, for example, the direction of the wind is suitable Romania, Bulgaria, and so on. Therefore, it is if the reactor is operating at some power. Well, even if power unit number 5, it will not produce electricity, but it will, and it is discharged at 1% of its power. Then the accident will also be served with radiation consequences.
I lately read in professional publications that the countries of the European Union are also investigating these situations. They also make model plans and predict possible accidents. In other countries, do specialists really prepare? Do they now really realize the whole threat to their country? Do we have communication with them?
Communication is between experts. For example, in France there is IRSN, an institute like the State Scientific and Technical Center of Nuclear and Radiation Safety, subordinated to the State Nuclear Regulatory Inspectorate of Ukraine. And we have been cooperating since the beginning of the 90s, and American experts, this is the Pacific Laboratory, Argonne National Laboratory, which are in the sphere of management of the US Department of Energy. The models are verified by the French in particular, because we have one European radar system implemented at our NPPs, the Ukrainian Hydrometeorological Center, and Energoatom and so on. It is calculated and verified by the French. They help. We helped the Japanese implement there. Mark Zhelezniak is now in Fukushima. Mark Zhelezniak also communicates with everyone. Everyone communicates. I don't know whether these countries are preparing to liquidate the consequences of radiation, because this is a response to a crisis situation. Each state has its own system. We also have a state crisis response system approved by the Cabinet of Ministers. But they are preparing, because the lady was there, Skvortsova. who is the head of the Federal Medical and Biological Agency of Russia. She was at the beginning, before the explosion, before the dam was blown up. And they conducted radiation protection training there. And she told the Russian media that she had opened 10 beds in the city hospital for radiation-affected patients. Well, that is, they were already preparing an information field. That is a crime announced in advance. This is Russia. That is, I start my morning by reading the Russian mass media in order to understand what they are preparing for us in order to say later. That's what we said. Here they are. That is, they shut down 105 unmanned aerial vehicles, kamikazes, in 10 days of May over the ZNPP. We see 150 paratroopers writing in notes at the IAEA, 150 paratroopers by board, 50 boats. Well, you know, it's funny. 150 paratroopers on 50 boats will land in the place where I don't even know how many Russian military, where everything is mined, the entire coastline, around, inside. Sniper positions are equipped on the roofs of nuclear departments, mines. Well, everything is mined, and even the IAEA has admitted it.
This is completely another situation. We understand that they mostly direct their messages to their society, but we see that even though European institutions do not believe a single word that comes out from Putin and his propagandists, but we do not see a reaction to prejudice it. Everyone was very surprised by Mr. Grossi's last statement. He admitted that yet it was mined, the plant, and then he added, it's for safety. For safety from whom? Really? Well, I understand those workers from the Russian side who are there now at the plants, they're Putin's hostages. They understand all the dangers, but can't do nothing. But then what does Mr. Grossi understand? Is he also scared of Putin? And he continues to say this. Well, excuse me, it's nonsense.
Well, this is my personal opinion. But in my opinion, the Russians have some kind of hook for him. Whether he is corrupt or not, I don't know. This is what our special services should do. But the statement that I was informed that mining for defensive purposes, and who are we defending against? We are defending against the personnel of the ZNPP? Yes, there are mines. It doesn't meet safety standards, but does not affect the operation of safety systems. Well, as an engineer, I'm in shock.
Is this an absurd statement?
Absurd. Another thing, why doesn't he insist on putting Power Unit 5 into cold shutdown? He understands that this is the jurisdiction of Ukraine. There is State Nuclear Regulatory Inspectorate. It issued an order. He was at the station. He didn't say a word. Moreover, he produced Russian narratives on his website. The Russians explained to him, we need steam to process wastewater from washing overalls and for air conditioning. So we have to weigh safety issues and radiation consequences and wastewater. Well, collect them in some containers. Well, that's all. That's why I've been speaking out very sharply lately, because concerns. The UN Security Council also expressed concerns on June 23. Therefore, the absolute helplessness of international organizations, OSCE, UN Security Council, IAEA, it needs a full reorganization after we win. And that's why, in my opinion, we can't count on the International Red Cross or anything. Only the armed forces of Ukraine, the people of Ukraine, and patriotic personnel.
I just want to summarize that has been said before it happened at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Did you read his statements, not only about Ukraine, but on the other possible risks? Is he a smart person? Is he a professional person? Is his expertise in his statements differ from what he's saying now about the Ukrainian situation?
He is not an engineer. He is a diplomat by education.
But there are specialists
Yes, there are
around him.
specialists, but the specialist is his deputy Chudakov, the Russian who managed the department in the deputy general director of the IAEA, Chudakov. He heads the Department of Nuclear Energy. When they go with a mission, we had the right to agree on candidates, and true condition of Ukraine was that no citizen of Russia, and even the countries that are governed, there are satellites, for example, some. But this is not normal. That is, I am in favor of limiting the rights and privileges of Russia in the IAEA, that it should not be in the board of governors of the IAEA. And I believe that Grossi should not be elected for a second term at the General Conference in September of this year. This is a great diplomatic work of our diplomats, should be with partners, because the organization is huge. And it is necessary there to work in addition to our strategic partners who understand. There are countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America that live in another world.
We have one more very interesting neighbor, Hungary, and Viktor Orban. And the latest information is that together with Russia, they are building a nuclear power plant. But this situation may someday be used by Putin if Orban or Orban's successor does not follow the path that Russia wants. What is the threat to European countries?
It's a miracle for me. How did they give permission for construction using Russian technologies? Yes, this is an additional leverage for blackmailing the European Union. Rosatom has always been,
Let's say corrupt.
Corrupt. They bribed politicians and, accordingly, nuclear scientists in European countries, in those countries that use nuclear fuel for the operation of nuclear power plants, build it on the Soviet projects, for example, and other things. I have no doubt that this will be an additional leverage. And that's why, when, for example, I have a French journalist take comments on Radio France, its state, I said, why has France not applied economic sanctions until now? Like Great Britain, Canada, like the USA, like Ukraine towards Russia. Why did you buy services of Russian nuclear fuel cycle for 800 million euros in the 22nd year, when there in the 22nd year and in the 21st it was for 19 millions? Well, you have made a reserve, now make sanctions. Aren't you afraid? You produce 70% of electricity at nuclear power plants. Are you not afraid of terrorists? Aren't you afraid? Therefore, it is a strange situation in the European Union that until now the decision is taken by consensus. Why can't the European Union adopt the sanctions against Rosatom in a consolidated manner? I suggest that European countries decide to individually apply sanctions, each country against Rosatom, and personal sanctions against management and staff who was at the ZNPP during this time.
I thank you very much for this interesting conversation. I hope that our viewers from different countries will listen to your words and hear them. And they definitely have the opportunity to influence their governments in order to make important decisions and on time. And it's even better to do it in advance so that we don't have to spend 300 years in a row. Thank you very much.